So I had many wonderful teachers in my life, incredible teachers, but the one who really changed my life was a man named Frank Wiener. He was my high school AP English teacher. So I had him in my senior year, which was 1976 to 77. And he's someone I will never forget. And I can still remember his classroom so well and his little shared office. It was a very intense class. Did I say English teacher? So we read classics like Ulysses, Hamlet, The Stranger, but he also had us read New York Times book reviews. We read the poetry, quirky poetry of the time of Archie and Mehitabel, a typing cockroach who writes for the cat. We studied editorial cartoons, just a range of things. But the thing about Mr. Wiener is that he didn't just teach content, which he did brilliantly and really with lasting effects on us, but he also wanted to teach us how to think. And that was his real mission. So he did all kinds of exercises to help us really drill down, to think visually, to brainstorm effectively, to do all kinds of things before we set out to write. And for me, that's what really stayed from Mr. Wiener's teaching, was how to write. He would have us, and again, this is AP English, so it was a year long. So, we had more content than perhaps in some settings, but he had us write author papers, and they would get harder and harder until the final one was 3 authors. And the thing about Mr. Wiener that no one else had ever done, in my experience, is he would have us rewrite until either we were exhausted and quit, or he was satisfied. And he would just keep going with you. So every paper I wrote for Mr. Wiener went through at least 3 revisions. And each time you did the revisions, you got into deeper and deeper stuff as you kind of clean things up. And it was an amazing feeling for a teenager to be taken so seriously as a thinker and a writer. And I didn't mention this, but Mr. Wiener, he was a very elegant man. He had left advertising, which he hated, to do his true love, which was teaching. And he always had a jacket, and he always had a pipe. Those were days when, at least in his office, he could smoke his pipe. And he'd sit with his pipe and he would listen and he would probe and he would ask you things. But so he was just a singular figure. And to convey what was so special about him, besides what I've already said, is that the year after I graduated, Mr. Wiener had a sabbatical. And he used that sabbatical to go to our high school as a student, because he knew that students' experience was fractured and there were better ways for students to learn, and there were better ways for students to become thinkers and readers and writers in their own right. So he actually, this man who was probably 60 something, went back to school as a student alongside other students and did what they were supposed to do, and then wrote about it to try to improve high school for everyone, to make it less alienating and more effective. In the same spirit, Mr. Wiener was a union activist, and he, of course, was a tenured teacher, but he was always looking out for the teachers who weren't, for the new young teachers who were working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. And for years, I had a newspaper photo of him that I had mounted, and he was on a picket line in the rain with his pipe, and his sign said, "Teachers pay taxes too." And there he was, marching for the young teachers. So it really reminds me of some of what we're facing now, and the kind of solidarity we're seeing among teachers. But one last thing about Mr. Wiener. Years later, as a young professor, I won a major college teaching award. And for the ceremony, we were told to talk about a teacher who changed our lives. So of course I talked about Frank Wiener, but then I thought, gee, why don't I send this to him? He deserves to know what a lasting impact he had on me. So he invited me back to town and set up a dinner with 2 of my other favorite teachers. And the next morning, he and I had breakfast. And before that, he'd gone to his office and he got my folder from 1976 to 1977 and gave me my folder from his attic. This man loved us so much that he kept all our work as if he was keeping us going in his life and in his heart. And he will always be in my heart.